The morning sun glowed softly over the village of Igbisa, gilding the palm roofs and red earth in a warm shimmer. Birds called from the trees, and smoke from cooking fires curled lazily into the sky. In the chief's compound, laughter echoed, the laughter of Nia, the only daughter of Chief Oloran. She was the kind of girl whose presence softened the air, her laughter bright, her movements graceful, her kindness known by everyone. Her late mother, Adunni, had left her a single heirloom, a gold necklace shaped like a rising sun. It was said to hold the blessing of the ancestors, protection, prosperity, and truth. Chief Oloran often touched it when he looked at his daughter. "This," he'd say, "is more than gold. It carries your mother's spirit. Never let it leave your neck." Nia's days were simple but filled with love. She helped the cooks prepare yam for the poor, fetched water for elders, and read her father's records at dusk. She had no pride despite her father's wealth. The people adored her, the palm wine tappers, the market women, even the smallest children who followed her through the village. Then came Iridi. The chief had been alone for many seasons, and the council urged him to remarry. "A man cannot rule with an empty house," they said. Iridi arrived from a distant town, tall, beautiful, with skin smooth as night and eyes that shone like polished glass. She came with her daughter, Tammy, a quiet girl about Nia's age. At first all seemed well. Iridi spoke softly and moved with grace. She brought gifts to the villagers and knelt humbly before the elders. Even Nia welcomed her with open arms. "At last," she said, smiling, "a mother to guide me." But behind that perfect smile, envy flickered. She watched the way the people adored Nia, how the girl's laughter drew others near. She noticed the gold necklace, the one everyone whispered about, and the way Chief Oloran's eyes softened whenever his daughter entered the room. Iridi's own daughter, Tammy, stood in the shadows, watching silently as her mother's envy deepened. Then the sickness came. It started with a cough, small and harmless. But by the second week, Chief Oloran's strength had begun to fade. The healers came and went, mixing herbs and chanting old prayers, but his breath grew shallower each night. One evening, as the moon hung low and red, he called Nia to his bedside. "My child," he whispered, his voice a thin thread. "The world is full of those who smile with their mouths and curse with their hearts. Keep your mother's necklace close. It will protect you when I no longer can." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she held his hand. "Father, please don't leave me." He smiled weakly. "I will not leave. I will live in the land, in the wind, in the river that carries your tears. Remember this, what is lost in this world is never lost to the ancestors." By dawn the drums began to beat, slow, deep, mournful. Chief Oloran was gone. The village gathered to bury him beneath the old irako tree. Nia stood by his grave, her face streaked with tears, the gold necklace gleaming faintly against her skin. Beside her, Iridi wept too, but her tears were dry before the dust settled. After the funeral, Iridi moved quickly. She took charge of the compound, ordering servants about, whispering to elders. She smiled at Nia, but her words grew sharp. "You are no longer a child," she said one night, "yet you cling to your father's shadow. A wise girl learns when to bow." "I bow to no greed," Nia replied quietly. That night, Iridi sat before her mirror, her reflection flickering in lamplight. "Everything she has should have been mine," she murmured. "The land, the cattle, the gold." From the corner, Tammy spoke hesitantly. "Mother, she has done nothing to you." Iridi's eyes hardened. "Then she will, if I let her live long enough." Outside, the wind howled through the palm trees, scattering dust across the chief's compound. The servants whispered of strange things, of the stepmother's eyes glowing like embers, of a shadow that followed her even in moonlight. And in her room, Nia sat before her father's empty chair, clutching the gold necklace to her heart. She did not yet know that the ground beneath her feet would soon become her grave, or that the same earth that swallowed her would one day raise her higher than those who buried her. The days after Chief Oloran's burial stretched long and uneasy. The once lively compound grew cold, silent, and full of whispers. Iridi ruled it now, her laughter sharp as glass, her words laced with venom. She wore her widow's cloth for formality, but beneath the black wrapper gleamed ambition like a hidden blade. Nia did not contest her authority. She rose early each morning, swept the yard, fetched water, and tended to her father's shrine. But the servants noticed that Iridi watched her constantly, eyes tracing every move, every breath. At night, they sometimes heard Iridi pacing, muttering in low tones, her shadow bending strangely against the lamplight. One evening, Tammy entered her mother's room quietly. Iridi was seated before a small pot of burning herbs, whispering to it as smoke curled up like dark fingers. "Mother," Tammy said timidly, "what are you doing?" Iridi turned slowly, her eyes shining faintly red from the glow. "Protecting what is mine," she said. "The ancestors favor those who take what they deserve. But Nia is not of my blood," Iridi hissed. "Yet she holds everything I have worked for. When her father was alive, she was his son. Now that he is gone, that light must be put out." Tammy froze, fear creeping up her spine. "You can't mean." Iridi stood tall and terrible. "I mean to set things right." The next morning Iridi called Nia. "My daughter," she said with honeyed voice, "we must visit the family farm. There are debts to settle with the traders, and I need your help to carry the ledgers." Nia hesitated, but respect bound her words. "Yes, mother." They set out together at dawn. The road wound through the forest, sunlight filtering through tall trees. The air was heavy, still, the kind that listens before a storm. As they walked, Nia spoke softly about her father, about rebuilding the garden he loved. Iridi only nodded, her lips tight. By noon they reached a clearing near the river, the same river that once mirrored Chief Aloran's laughter. But now it was quiet, its surface dark and unmoving. "Mother, where are the traders?" Nia asked, scanning the empty path. "They will meet us soon," Iridi said, though her tone held a strange finality. "Come rest by the old pit. You must be tired." Nia approached the pit, a deep hollow in the red earth once used for storing yam. She leaned forward to look, and in that instant, a blow struck the back of her head. Pain exploded through her skull. She fell to her knees, dizzy, the world tilting into red haze. "Mother?" she gasped, turning weakly. Iridi stood above her, breathing hard, a heavy stick in her hand. Her face was twisted, not in anger but triumph. "You think goodness will save you?" she spat. "You think the ancestors love you more than me? Everything you are, I will bury it." Nia's vision blurred. Blood trickled down her neck as Iridi called out, "Tammy, come here." The girl came running, eyes wide in terror. "Mother, what are you doing?" "Stop this." Iridi's voice cracked like thunder. "Help me. Now." Tammy froze, trembling, torn between horror and fear. Iridi shoved her aside and began dragging Nia toward the pit. The young woman was half-conscious, her gold necklace glinting faintly in the sun. As Iridi shoveled dirt over her, Nia's lips moved weakly, whispering words that barely reached the air. "The earth knows the innocent." The last thing she saw before the soil covered her face was the sky, vast, blindingly blue, and the faint outline of her stepmother's shadow falling across her like night. By the time Iridi was done, sweat poured down her face, her hands shaking. She stood over the fresh mound of earth, breathing hard, whispering, "Now the land is mine." Tammy fell to her knees, sobbing. "You killed her, mother. You killed her." Iridi turned sharply, grabbing her daughter's chin. "Silence. Do you want the spirits to hear? She is gone, and no one will ever find her." But the earth had heard. Far beneath, where roots wove through cool soil, Nia still breathed, faintly. The blow had not killed her, and the loose sand left small pockets of air. Her fingers twitched, her heart pounding in terror. She clawed weakly upward, the gold necklace pressing against her throat. Above, the wind began to stir, rustling the trees. The river shimmered, as though something unseen had woken beneath its surface. By the time Iridi and Tammy reached home, the sky had darkened. The storm was coming. And somewhere under that trembling ground, the girl they thought buried was whispering her first prayer to the ancestors, not for vengeance but for deliverance. The earth pressed heavy and cold against Nia's skin. Darkness filled her lungs, thick as water, and the weight of soil pinned her arms like chains. Panic clawed at her chest, she couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. Only the faint thud of her heartbeat echoed in the suffocating dark. Her father's words came back to her, soft as wind, distant as a dream. "The earth holds those it loves, and the ancestors do not abandon the innocent." Her fingers moved. Weakly at first, then with growing desperation. She clawed at the soil above her, coughing, trembling. Every movement sent pain shooting through her skull, but something inside refused to let go. The necklace against her neck pulsed faintly, warm as if alive. The soil around her seemed to shift, a subtle loosening like the earth itself exhaled. Above ground, the storm had broken. Thunder rolled across the sky, rain fell in thick sheets, drenching the forest. The pit began to flood, water seeping through cracks and softening the packed dirt. Inch by inch, Nia's hand broke through the surface, a trembling, mud-streaked hand reaching toward the rain. Then another breath, sharp, wet, miraculous. She gasped, dragging herself upward until her face burst through the earth. Rain poured down, washing the dirt from her eyes, her hair, her skin. She coughed, gasping, crying, every sound both pain and rebirth. The lightning illuminated the forest for a moment, and in that brief flash she looked almost otherworldly, drenched, trembling, but alive. Nia crawled out of the pit, collapsing beside it. The storm raged, wind howling through the trees, bending branches like bows. She looked toward the sky, sobbing. "Ancestors," she whispered hoarsely, "if you have saved me, show me the way." A streak of lightning struck a nearby tree, splitting it open. Through its broken trunk she saw something glowing, faint but steady. Crawling closer, she found an old clay charm half buried in the roots, a mark of her people's protection, the sign of a Dunny, her mother's lineage. She clutched it to her chest, realizing she was not alone. The rain washed her tracks away. The river, swollen and wild, seemed to call her name. She stumbled toward it, her body aching, her breath ragged. When she reached the bank, she fell to her knees and let the water cleanse her wounds. Then, in exhaustion, she lay beside the river and slept. When dawn came, the world was silent again, washed clean. Birds returned to the trees, and the sun painted gold across the wet leaves. A woman stood by the river's edge, old, with hair as white as cotton and eyes like dark glass. She was gathering herbs when she saw the girl lying motionless in the mud. "Child?" she whispered, kneeling. "By the spirits, are you alive?" Nia's eyes fluttered open. The woman helped her sit, offering water from a gourd. "Drink, little one. You are safe here." "My name is Nia," she croaked. "My father was Chief Oloran. My stepmother, she." The old woman raised a hand gently. "You need not speak. The earth already told me your story." Nia blinked in confusion. The woman smiled faintly. "I am Mama Eid, the river's keeper. The storm brought you to me. You have been chosen for something greater than revenge." Over the next days, Mama Eid nursed her back to health. She fed her roasted yam, bathed her wounds in healing herbs, and sang old songs that carried power. Nia learned that Mama Eid was no ordinary woman. She was a priestess, one who listened to the whispers of water and wind. One night, under the full moon, Mama Eid said softly, "The river does not return what is lost without reason. You were buried in earth and raised by rain. Both are symbols of rebirth. Your stepmother sought to end your name, but instead, she awakened your destiny." "What destiny?" Nia asked, her voice still frail. "To restore balance. To remind those who mock justice that the ancestors never sleep." Mama Eid gave her a small carved staff, plain but powerful. "When you are ready, return. But not with anger. Return as one who has been tested and found worthy." Nia held the staff, feeling its weight, its quiet hum beneath her palm. She looked out at the river, its surface gleaming with starlight. "I will return," she whispered. "Not to destroy her, but to reclaim what was mine." The wind stirred, rustling the palm leaves in agreement. Far away in the chief's compound, Iridi laughed before her mirror, admiring the gold necklace she had stolen from Nia's neck before burying her. "The world bends to those who take," she murmured. But outside her window, the night wind carried a whisper from the river, soft, distant, and chilling. "Nia lives." The moon had waned twice since Nia was pulled from the earth. Her wounds had healed, but the scars, deep, brown, proud, remained as quiet reminders of her survival. Each morning, she rose before dawn to fetch water from the river and sat with Mama Eid, learning the old ways, the herbs that calmed storms, the chants that called rain, the silence that healed the spirit. "The river gave you back, child," Mama Eid said one evening as they watched the current shimmer like liquid silver. "Now you must decide what kind of woman you will be, one of rage or one of restoration." Nia's eyes were distant. "Can they not be the same?" Mama Eid smiled faintly. "Ah, you are your mother's daughter. She too had fire in her bones. But remember, fire can warm or destroy." That night, Nia dreamt again. She stood by her own grave, the pit Iridi had dug. But this time, flowers grew from the soil, white lilies, their petals bright under moonlight. From the shadows, a soft voice called her name. "Nia." She turned and saw her mother's spirit, clothed in light. "You are not buried, my daughter. You are planted. Rise and let your roots reclaim the ground they stole." Nia awoke before sunrise, her heart steady, her mind clear. It was time. At the edge of the forest, Mama Eid wrapped a bright Kent shawl around her shoulders, yellow, red, and blue like dawn fire. "Go, river's daughter," she whispered. "Walk with courage. Speak with truth. And when you stand before evil, remember, justice wears no crown, but it bows to none." Nia began her journey home. The path to the village was long and overgrown. Birds darted through the trees, the smell of wet earth filled the air. Every step carried memory, her father's laughter, the warmth of her old home, and the night she had been betrayed. By midday she reached the outskirts. Children played near the well, but when they saw her, they froze, whispering wide-eyed. "It's her," one murmured. "The chief's daughter, but she's supposed to be dead." Nia smiled softly. "Tell your mothers that the wind has changed," she said. The news spread like wildfire. By sunset the whole village was murmuring. Men left their calabashes half-filled, women stopped pounding yam. Iridi's name trembled in the air like smoke. Inside the chief's compound, Iridi sat draped in gold, her eyes lined with kohl, her lips gleaming red. Servants fanned her lazily as she gave orders. When a trembling boy burst in and stammered, "My lady, the girl." "Nia, she's back." Iridi's fan dropped from her hand. "Foolish child," she hissed. "Do not speak that name again." But her heart beat faster. She dismissed everyone pacing. "Impossible. I buried her myself." Then thunder rumbled outside, though the sky was clear. At twilight, Nia stood before the compound gates, her shawl glinting in the fading light. The guards hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes. She spoke quietly, her voice steady. "Tell your mistress the earth has returned what she tried to hide." Inside, Iridi's hands shook as she poured palm wine into a cup. "Let her come," she said coldly. "I want to see this ghost." When Nia entered, the courtyard fell silent. Iridi's painted smile trembled. The girl before her was no ghost. She was alive, radiant, her presence commanding. "You look well, mother," Nia said, her tone calm. "Gold suits you." Iridi tried to laugh. "So the ancestors pitied you. You should thank me, I gave you a second birth." Nia's gaze sharpened. "You gave me a grave. The ancestors gave me breath." The women nearby gasped. Iridi's jaw clenched. "Watch your tongue, child. You forget who rules this house." "This house," Nia said softly, "was my father's. His blood runs in my veins. You can steal his gold, but not his name." She stepped closer until the air between them tightened like a bowstring. "The river carried my cries, and now it carries your truth. Every lie you told will be washed clean." Outside, thunder rolled again, louder this time, shaking the walls. Wind tore through the courtyard, snuffing out the oil lamps. Iridi stumbled back, terrified. "What are you?" she whispered. Nia's eyes glowed with reflected lightning. "What you made me." By the time the storm broke, the villagers had gathered outside the gates. They saw the torches flicker, heard the shouting, the wail that followed. When the doors finally opened, Nia walked out alone, her face streaked with rain and tears, but her eyes calm, unshaken. Behind her, Iridi's gold ornaments lay scattered in the mud. No one asked what had happened. They didn't need to. The air itself carried the answer. Nia looked up at the sky, letting the rain wash her face. "Let the earth judge us both," she whispered. And somewhere deep in the forest, Mama Eid smiled at the sound of thunder fading. The storm that night was the heaviest the village had seen in years. Roofs shook, trees bent low, and the river swelled so high it licked at the roots of the baobab. When dawn came, the village lay silent, broken branches, flooded paths, the scent of new beginnings in the air. But it was not just the land that had changed. When the villagers emerged, they found Iridi's compound torn open, her gold scattered, her servants gone, her throne overturned. Some said she fled during the night. Others swore they heard her screaming until the thunder swallowed her voice. Whatever the truth, she was gone. And in her place stood Nia, alive, strong, unshaken. She did not claim the throne. She did not boast or curse. She simply walked to the river and knelt, cupping the water in her palms. "Thank you," she whispered, "for hearing me when no one else would." The people gathered slowly, afraid and amazed. The chief's elders bowed their heads, one murmuring, "The ancestors do not sleep." Over the next days, Nia helped rebuild what the storm had broken. She worked beside the farmers, carried baskets of yams, and soothed crying children. Though she bore scars, her spirit glowed. Women came to her for counsel, men for judgment, children for stories. The same villagers who once whispered about her now called her the daughter of the earth. One evening, the elders summoned her to the square. The air was thick with incense and dusk light. Drums thudded low, steady like a heartbeat. The oldest elder rose. "Child of the river and the grave," he said, "the spirits have spoken. The one who tried to bury you has vanished into the wind. But the land needs a keeper, one who remembers both pain and mercy. Will you guide our people?" Nia looked down, fingers tracing the lines of her palms. She thought of her father's smile, Mama Eid's wisdom, and the hollow loneliness of the earth above her once. "I will guide," she said softly, "but not rule. The river taught me that no hand can command the current, only follow its flow." The elders smiled. "Then you are truly your father's child." They placed a woven crown of river reeds on her head, green, glistening, humble. The crowd bowed. And for the first time in many years, the village sang not for wealth or power but for rebirth. That night, Nia returned to the place where she had been buried. The mound had softened, covered with wildflowers and rain. She knelt, pressing her palm to the soil. "I do not hate you, Iridi," she whispered. "You taught me the price of greed. May the earth teach you what mercy feels like." The wind stirred, gentle, almost like an answer. She smiled faintly. When she rose, she saw Mama Eid standing by the path, leaning on her staff. The old woman's eyes shone. "You found peace, child." "I found myself," Nia replied. "The earth remembered me, so I must remember it too." As seasons passed, her garden grew where her grave once was, lush and bright. She planted cassava, yams, and herbs. Women came to learn her ways. Children carried stories of her to neighboring villages, the woman who rose from the earth. Her story spread beyond the hills, reaching markets and distant lands. Traders would speak of her, not as a ghost or queen, but as a living proof that what's buried in injustice can rise again in power. One traveler once asked her, "Do you not wish to forget the past?" She smiled, eyes calm. "The past is the seed. If you burn it, nothing grows." Years later, when the same river flooded again, the villagers gathered at its edge. They feared ruin, but Nia stood calmly, hands raised toward the sky. "Do not fear the river," she said. "It comes not to destroy but to cleanse." The water receded by dawn, leaving the fields richer, greener, alive. From that day on they called the flood the blessing of Nia. When she finally grew old, her hair silver like moonlight, she sat each evening under the baobab, telling children her tale, not of vengeance but of return. "Remember," she would say, "the earth forgets no injustice but it also forgets no kindness. Plant both wisely." And when she passed, the villagers buried her by the river, where the water could sing to her forever. The rains returned weeks later, soft and rhythmic, washing the dust from every roof and road. The air smelled of wet soil and mango blossoms. Nia stood on the edge of her field, watching the crops sway gently, a living sea of green. Each leaf, each root, each stalk carried her story, the girl who was buried and bloomed. But peace does not erase whispers. When traders from distant lands arrived, they brought more than salt and fabric. They brought questions. "Is it true?" they would ask, eyes wide. "The woman who rose from the grave?" Nia would smile faintly and answer, "I rose from the soil, not the grave. The earth took me in as a seed." Still the tales grew taller. Some said she was born of spirits, others that she had made a pact with the river gods. Children crept near her fields at dusk, hoping to glimpse her glowing under moonlight. But Nia ignored the noise. Her peace was too deep to be disturbed by rumor. One evening Mama Eid visited her. The old woman's steps were slow now, her hair a cloud of white. She carried a small gourd tied with raffia. "The council sent this," she said, "for your blessings." Nia frowned. "Blessings? They want you to touch their charms before the planting season. They believe your spirit guards the land." Nia sighed gently. "I am not a spirit, Mama Eid." Mama Eid smiled. "Child, when people cannot name strength they call it magic." They sat together, listening to the rain tapping on the thatched roof. Lightning flashed far away, lighting up their faces, one wrinkled by time, the other softened by grace. "Do you ever miss her?" Mama Eid asked suddenly. Nia knew who she meant. The woman who had tried to bury her, her stepmother Iridi. "Sometimes," Nia whispered. "Not as she was, but as I wished she could have been." Mama Eid nodded. "Forgiveness is heavy but you carry it well." "I carry it," Nia said quietly, "because it leaves my hands free." That night, Nia dreamed of the earth again, warm, breathing, pulsing beneath her. But this time it did not close over her. It opened, revealing roots glowing like fire beneath the ground. From within them came a voice, "You have returned what was taken." She woke with tears in her eyes. It was not fear, it was recognition. The next morning she went to the same mound where she had once been buried. The flowers there had multiplied, red hibiscus, white lilies, tiny blue wildflowers curling around her ankles. She knelt and began to pull the weeds gently, her touch careful, reverent. Suddenly she found something half buried, a gold bangle dulled with dirt. It was Iridi's. She turned it over in her hand, her reflection faint in the metal. For a long time she just stared at it, then whispered, "May the river carry your spirit home." She threw it into the water, watching it sink until only ripples remained. As the sun broke through the clouds, the villagers gathered by the fields to begin planting. Nia led them silently, her palms touching the seeds before they entered the earth. "Grow in truth," she murmured. "Grow in peace." When the first shoots appeared weeks later, they grew faster than anyone remembered. The crops were so abundant that even neighboring villages came to see. "This land is blessed," they said. "The daughter of the earth walks here." But Nia only smiled and said, "The earth blesses those who no longer curse it." That night she sat alone by the fire. The flames danced golden against her skin, and she felt the quiet rhythm of her heart, steady, grateful, alive. She remembered the darkness of her burial, the weight of soil, the silence of betrayal, and how even then the earth had held her gently, not as a tomb but as a cradle. She whispered to herself, "They buried my body but not my spirit. That was their mistake." A soft wind rustled the leaves, almost as if the earth itself agreed. When Mama Eat passed months later, Nia buried her under the same baobab that had watched over them both. The villagers wept, but Nia stood tall, hands clasped. "She was the voice that taught me to listen," she said. "And I will keep listening, to the wind, to the soil, to the stories that live in silence." From then on, she became the village's storyteller. At night, by the fire, she spoke to children of courage, greed, and kindness. She told them of the girl who was buried, not to frighten them, but to teach them. When evil hides the light, the earth remembers where to shine. Seasons passed. The village that once whispered her name in fear now spoke it with pride. "Nia," they said, "the one who spoke to the earth and was answered." Her fields had become the heart of the region, green when others wilted, full when others were empty. But Nia's purpose had grown beyond the soil. She began teaching others what she had learned, not just how to plant seeds but how to rise after being buried. She gathered the village women under the great baobab tree every full moon, their faces lit by soft firelight and moon shimmer on their bright fabrics. "You cannot control what others bury you with," she would say, her voice low and certain, "but you can choose what grows from it." The women listened in silence, widows, mothers, daughters, all of them carrying their own scars. Some wept quietly. Others held their heads higher than before. And when dawn came, they left with new strength, as if her words had watered something inside them that had long been dry. One day, a group of travelers arrived from the neighboring kingdoms, traders, herbalists, and a tall man in white robes. They brought gifts, woven baskets, jars of honey, and a carved stool engraved with her name. The man spoke first. "We have heard the stories of the woman who died but lives, who forgave what others could not. Our queens and chiefs send word, teach us what you know. Teach us how to make the land listen." Nia smiled gently. "The land listens when we do not command it. I will come." So she began traveling, to nearby villages, to riversides, to towns where women bent under the weight of silence. Everywhere she went, people gathered to see her, not as a ghost or goddess, but as proof that survival could bloom into power. She taught them the rhythm of planting, the patience of water, the humility of tending to the ground that feeds all. Wherever her feet touched, life followed. But one place still waited for her return, the compound of her late father. Years had passed since she'd walked that red earth, and though she had forgiven, she had not forgotten. When she arrived, the gates creaked open slowly. The house was quiet now, half covered in vines. Inside, she saw the faded carvings her father once made, the broken stool where Irene used to sit, the cracked pot that once held the family's wealth. Her chest tightened, not in pain but in memory. The ghosts of her past lingered like soft echoes. In the courtyard, she found the same spot where she had been betrayed. The ground was still darker there, where the soil had once been disturbed. Kneeling down, she pressed her palm into it. "I am not here to curse you," she whispered. "I am here to bless what was broken." She dug a small hole, placed a handful of seeds inside and covered them with soil. "Grow," she said, her voice trembling, "and remind the world that pain can bloom." Rain began to fall, gentle at first, then steady, soaking into the ground. It felt as if the heavens themselves had waited for this moment. When she rose, she turned to see children from the village watching her. They were barefoot, wide-eyed, holding small baskets. "Is it true," one asked, "that you were buried here?" Nia smiled, kneeling to meet their gaze. "Yes," she said softly, "but look, even the earth learned to breathe again." The children stared at her, then at the small patch of freshly planted soil, where the first drops of rain already sank deep. Can we help it grow? Another child asked. She nodded. You already are. Months later, that same patch became a garden. Wild, colorful, unstoppable. Red flowers grew among yellow maize, vines twisted around banana trees, and butterflies hovered like spirits made of light. People began to call it the Garden of Forgiveness. Travelers came to see it. Lovers prayed there. Mothers brought their newborns to bless them. The air around it always smelled of rain and new beginnings. And every time Nia passed, she would stop to touch the leaves, whispering, "We are never what they tried to bury." As years went by, Nia's fame spread across kingdoms. Chiefs sent envoys to seek her counsel. Women named their daughters after her. But she remained humble, living in her small clay house near the river, teaching, planting, and telling her story only when asked. One night, as the moon rose full and bright, Mama Eid's voice came to her in a dream, soft as a lullaby. "You have become what the earth intended, my child." And Nia replied even in sleep, "Then let my story belong to the earth now, not mine alone but for every woman who rises." Years flowed like the river, steady and unstoppable. Nia was no longer the young woman who clawed her way from the earth. Her hair now held threads of silver, and her face bore the lines of wisdom. But her spirit had not dimmed. If anything, it burned brighter, like an eternal flame that refused to fade. Across the land, people began to call her by a new name, the Queen of the Soil. It wasn't a title she had asked for, nor one she boasted of. It was the people's gift, a way of naming what she had become. In her hands, the earth itself seemed to thrive. Where she walked, barren fields turned green. Farmers would leave bowls of grain by her door, whispering prayers for her blessing. Nia accepted their offerings not as worship, but as gratitude. She always said, "The soil does not bow to me, it walks beside me." One season, a great famine swept across neighboring lands. Rivers dried, crops turned to dust, and children cried from hunger. Kings and chiefs gathered in their courts, desperate for answers. Word spread, "There is a woman by the river who makes the land sing. Seek her, and the earth will listen again." So a royal envoy arrived at Nia's home, drummers, horses, and nobles dressed in cloths of gold. The air shimmered with heat as they approached her field. Nia stood barefoot among her crops, hands muddy, hair tied simply. The leader of the envoy dismounted and bowed deeply. "Great mother of the soil," he said, "our lands are dying. Our people starve. Teach us what you know or we perish." Nia looked at the horizon where the fields met the sky. "You come dressed in gold," she said gently, "but you must first come dressed in humility. The soil does not hear the voices of pride." The nobles looked uneasy, but the man bowed again. "Then teach us to bow." Nia traveled with them, riding through parched lands, through villages where the air smelled of dust and sorrow. When they reached the king's palace, the people gathered in silence. The courtyards were cracked, the gardens dead. The king himself came forward, a tall man with tired eyes. "Wise woman," he said, "if you can save my people, my throne will be yours." Nia smiled faintly. "I do not want your throne. I want your hands, every hand in your kingdom, to touch the soil again." She gathered the villagers, nobles, servants, even the king himself, and led them to the fields. Together they dug into the dry earth, their sweat mixing with dust. For 3 days and nights they labored, guided by her voice. She showed them how to dig new irrigation paths, how to feed the ground with crushed leaves and ash, how to let the earth breathe before planting. On the 7th day, clouds began to gather, slow, dark, heavy. The first drop fell. Then another. And then the heavens opened. Rain poured over the cracked land, soaking into every furrow, every seed. The people shouted, laughed, cried, dancing barefoot in the mud. The king knelt in the rain, head bowed low before her. "You have done what even my gods could not." Nia smiled softly. "The gods are not deaf, they were waiting for you to listen first." Months later the kingdom flourished. Fields once dry now shimmered with green. Grain overflowed from the granaries. The king sent messengers far and wide with one decree: "Let every child learn what the woman by the river has taught, that the land rewards the humble heart." But Nia refused to stay at court. She returned to her riverside home, where the sound of flowing water was the only crown she desired. Each evening she sat by the riverbank, watching the reflection of the moon ripple on the surface. The water always seemed to whisper back her story, of betrayal, of death, of rebirth. Yet what she felt now was peace, not the peace of forgetting but the peace of understanding. One night as the moon rose high, she heard a soft voice behind her. It was a young girl, one of the orphans she had once taken in. "Mother Nia," the girl said, People everywhere speak your name. They say you are a queen. Nia turned and smiled. A queen rules with power, child. I only listen to the earth. The girl frowned. Then why does the earth love you more than others? Because, Nia said, her voice like wind through grass, I never stopped loving it, even when it buried me. The girl knelt beside her, resting her head on Nia's shoulder. When I grow up, I want to listen too. Nia placed a hand on her cheek. Then the world will never run out of queens. The seasons came and went, each one softer than the last. The river ran gently now, its voice calmer, like it too had learned to rest. Nia's hair had grown white as the morning clouds, her hands lined and steady. Yet her eyes, they still glowed with the quiet strength that once carried her out of a grave. Every morning she walked to the water's edge with her staff, dipping her hand into the current. The villagers still came to see her, mothers bringing babies for blessings, farmers offering fruit and grain. But more than blessings, they came for her words. Mother Nia, they would ask, how do we keep peace in our homes? She would smile faintly. By learning when to plant silence and when to harvest forgiveness. Her voice had become part of the land, soft, certain, unhurried. One morning, as the mist rose from the river, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the village. The people whispered in shock. It was Adwoa, the stepmother, frail, bent, her once proud eyes now hollow. Time had taken its toll. Her wealth had vanished, her sons had turned against her, and her lands were barren. She leaned on a stick, shivering, her clothes torn and dusty. The villagers watched in silence as she approached Nia's hut. Nia, she croaked, voice trembling, I have walked for days. I have no home. No food. The earth rejects me. The gods are silent. Nia looked at her, the woman who had buried her alive, who had stolen everything from her youth, and for a long moment said nothing. Adwoa sank to her knees in the dust. I came to ask for forgiveness, she whispered. If I die, let me at least die near the river you once loved. The air was heavy still. Even the river seemed to hold its breath. Then Nia bent down slowly and placed a hand on her shoulder. The soil buried me once, she said softly, but when it gave me back my life, it also gave me mercy. Rest here if the river allows it. The villagers gasped. Mercy for the woman who had shown none. But Nia's eyes were calm, the calm of one who had seen both death and rebirth and learned that revenge was too small a crown for her spirit. For weeks, Nia cared for Adwoa as she once cared for her crops, washing her wounds, feeding her broth, sitting beside her through the night when pain woke her. The villagers whispered, she is tending the very hand that buried her. But Nia only smiled when she heard it. Every seed grows stronger when planted in the ashes of what was meant to destroy it, she said one evening as the firelight flickered across her face. Under her care, Adwoa softened. Her bitterness faded like smoke. One night, she reached for Nia's hand. I was wrong, she murmured. I thought power would fill me. But it emptied me instead. Nia nodded. The earth forgives when we kneel to it. Humans should learn the same. Adwoa's eyes filled with tears. You should hate me. I did, Nia admitted quietly. But hate is heavy. I had crops to grow. A weak laugh escaped Adwoa's lips, the first in years. You always were the stronger one. That night, she slept peacefully for the first time in her life. By morning she was gone, her hands folded, her face calm. The villagers came to Nia's hut when the rooster crowed. They found her sitting by Adwoa's still body, eyes lifted toward the dawn. She has gone back to the soil, Nia said simply. Let her rest by the river. It will remember her as it remembers me. They buried Adwoa at the edge of the water, beneath a tree whose roots drank from both their memories, the one who buried and the one who rose. Nia stood over the grave for a long while, the wind lifting her white hair, her eyes shining with something both sad and holy. When the first rain of the season began to fall, she smiled faintly. The river forgives, she whispered. And so must I. In the months that followed, Nia grew weaker. The fields bloomed brighter than ever, as if the soil itself wanted to honor her. On the night she felt her time near, she asked the young women of the village to gather. They sat around her as fireflies danced in the dusk. Listen to me, she said softly. If life buries you, remember, the earth does not bury to destroy. It buries to grow. Her final breath came like a sigh, peaceful, full, complete. The next morning, the villagers buried her beside the river, next to the woman who once buried her there. Two graves side by side, one of cruelty, one of grace, and between them, a single flowering tree whose roots drank from both. They say the river still sings at night, a song carried on the wind. She was buried in darkness. but rose in light. The soil that silenced her now speaks her name every night. And so the story of Nia, the girl who was buried alive, who rose, who forgave, became a song, a prayer, a truth carved into the heart of the land. The years drifted gently over the village like the slow passing of a soft wind. The story of Nia, the girl who rose from the grave, had become legend, told under moonlight, sung by children at the riverbank, whispered by mothers to their daughters. Her name was no longer just a memory. It had become a lesson. The river still flowed beside her grave, its waters clearer now, as if it too had found forgiveness. Trees grew tall around it, their leaves glimmering when the wind passed. The villagers called them Nia's guardians. In every season women came to the river. Some came with tears, some with offerings, others with questions the world refused to answer. They would kneel by the water and whisper, "Teach us how to rise again." The elders said that if you listened closely enough, the river answered, not in words but in the hush between waves, in the stillness that follows rain. Years later, a young girl named Amma came to the village, barefoot, carrying nothing but a small cloth bag. She was quiet, her eyes bright with hunger and fear. The villagers took pity on her and gave her food, but when she reached the river, she stopped. There, under the shade of the old tree, she found the twin graves, one marked simply Adwoa, and the other, Nia, daughter of the river. Amma knelt and traced the carvings with trembling fingers. "They said she was buried alive," she whispered. "They said she rose again." The river's breeze brushed her face gently, almost like a mother's hand. That night, Amma dreamed of a woman standing by the water, wrapped in white light. Nia. Her eyes were calm, her smile small but certain. "Child," the spirit said, "they buried me thinking it was my end. But the soil only taught me how to begin again." Amma reached out, tears glistening. "How do I begin?" "By forgiving yourself for breaking," Nia replied. "And by remembering that the seed must die before it grows." When Amma woke, the dawn light spilled through the hut like gold. She rose, walked to the river and washed her face. From that day she tended the fields with the same care Nia once had, with patience, with love, with strength drawn from every wound. As seasons passed, Amma became known for her gardens, lush, abundant, alive. Travelers came from far and near, not for trade but to hear her stories. And when they asked where she learned her wisdom, she would smile and point toward the river. "There is a woman who sleeps beneath that soil," she would say softly, "and her spirit waters the roots of everything that grows here." Each year, during the harvest moon, the villagers gathered beside the river to celebrate the festival of rising. They sang the song of Nia, a melody that had traveled through generations. She was buried in darkness, but rose in light. Her pain became gardens, her tears became life. And when the drums echoed deep into the night, the fire's glow reflecting on the water, the people swore they saw a figure in white moving through the mist, a woman walking along the riverbank, her smile quiet, her spirit free. Amma grew old in time, her hair silver like moonlight, her eyes still full of river light. She built a small hut near the graves, and every evening she sat before them, telling stories to the children, stories of betrayal, of courage, of forgiveness. "Remember," she would say, "what the world buries in cruelty, the earth can raise in kindness." The children would nod, wide-eyed, the reflection of the fire dancing in their faces. When Amma passed peacefully one night, the villagers buried her beside the two graves, Adwoa and Nia, completing the circle. 3 women now slept beneath the same sky, one who destroyed, one who forgave, and one who carried their story forward. And as years turned into centuries, the legend of Nia became more than a tale. It became truth, a reminder that no evil can bury what was born to rise. They say the river still sings for her. On quiet nights, if you stand by the water, you might hear the faint sound of a woman's laugh, soft, proud, and unbroken. "I was buried once," the wind whispers through the reeds, "but I rose again, and the earth remembered my name."